my talk. Here we go. How he said he living life as a gringo. Where you question where you fit in every time you mingle. They say you do this with not enough that. My rapping is really bad. This life as a gringo.
Yes, hello and welcome to another episode of Life as a Gringo. I am Dramos, of course, and I'm back. I have made it back to New Jersey. I am back from Puerto Rico, begrudgingly, I guess would be the word that I would use to describe how I'm feeling. But it's good to be home. I think I have a lot to think about, which is exciting. And yeah, Puerto Rico is it just feels right, man. But we'll see where it goes with that. If you didn't listen to the last episode, then you have no idea what the fuck I'm talking about. I unexpectedly got, I don't want to say stranded, like somewhat stranded, but also like I was okay with it and extended it more than I had to. But yeah. I was in Puerto Rico again, getting to just touch the culture and keep building connections with a lot of the people I had met down there a few weeks ago. So it was nice. But this is not about Puerto Rico. This is about Thursday trends. We will talk about Puerto Rico. Like some interesting things were happening while I was down there, as far as the elections go and Bad Bunny making headlines. For me, Gente segment, I gotta touch on Benito again. I gotta touch on Bad Bunny because, you know, I've been hypercritical on him doing more with his platform, with his voice, and I gotta say I've been kind of, I wouldn't say impressed, but happy. And particularly one of the things that he did lately seems to have rattled some of the politicians on the island. So that's when you know an impact is happening. So we'll touch on that for our Mi Gente segment. As far as you know, some of the more serious topics, we're just really going to get into, I don't know, it's like a slower headline week, which I think is a good thing. But I wanted to touch on Latin Heritage Month, or Hispanic Heritage Month, which kicked off 2 weeks ago, week and a half ago, September 15th. So I want to touch on that and bring you some facts from the Pew Research Center, key facts about U.S. Latinos. They did a little special post for National Hispanic Heritage Month. So I want to touch on that. Also found this really interesting article on We Are Me Too, talking about Latinas in the workplace and the idea of resisting whiteness in the workplace and how that can be problematic, unfortunately, for Latinas. So we will touch on that in our For the People in the Back segment.
Say it louder for the people in the back. Say it louder for the people in the back.
All right, so it is National Hispanic Heritage Month. The Pew Research Center put together some statistics, some facts about Latinos here in the States that I found to be really interesting that I want to share. And it's something different, I think, than I've done in the past for Hispanic Heritage Month. I think in the past I've done maybe celebrities that you didn't know that were Latino. And I've also done Latin history that you didn't know. And now let's read some facts from the Pew Research Center that is pretty interesting when it comes to our demographic and, you know, us as a culture and a community. Now, first one they said is the U.S. Hispanic population reached 63.6 million in 2022, up from 50.5 million in 2010. The 26% increase in the Hispanic population was faster than the nation's 8% growth rate, but slower than the 34% increase in the Asian population in 2022. Hispanics made up nearly 1 in 5 people in the U.S., 19%, up from 16% in 2010 and just 5% in 1970. So, damn, Hispanics make up nearly 1 in every 5 people here in the States. We out here, man. They say Hispanics have played a major role in U.S. population growth over the past decade. The U.S. population growth by 24.5%. By 24.5 million from 2010 to 2022, and Hispanics accounted for 53% of the increase, a greater share than any other racial or ethnic group. We out here with them numbers. That's also why it's like, I mean, and it's tough. And I was like having a conversation with myself last night. I was interviewing myself about the Latin vote. Like a crazy person. I know that sounds fucking wild, but this is what I do for fun, people. I talk to myself and interview myself as if I'm a correspondent on like MSNBC or something. Anyway, my first gut reaction is like, man, think about how powerful we would be as like a voting corps, or we are as a voting corps if we show up and show out, if you will. But, you know, there is so much diversity within our community, and it's a gift and a curse, I think, you know, when I reflect on all these things, because, you know, we have so many different issues that affect some members of our community while others not so much, you know, and so many, I think, conflicting ideas, and so many things generationally that are in contrast, and certain things that are culturally, you know, depending on what country we are from, you know, that all sort of affect our outlook on something like politics. And I would, as much as I would love to see us sort of be collectively on the same page, and in many ways, I think it also, as far as like us being spoken to, the major issue has been the fact that we are sort of just being spoken to from this sort of blanket generalization, rather than individual ideas or individual policies or issues that might affect us, depending on where we're from. And I guess that's been, you know, the major fault of all political parties. I would love to maybe see statistics on like the Latin vote as far as our turnout rates go, and in terms of, you know, who's eligible to be legally able to vote. But I think if we did begin to show out in those numbers, you know, that we have the potential of, regardless of what part of the political spectrum you fall upon, I think that we would, you know, be a group that demands far more attention for the things that affect us, you know. But it takes us all showing up and doing our part and participating in the system of this country. Now, moving on, that was just an aside, if you will, but moving on to some more of the facts. They say the number of Latinos who say they are multiracial has increased dramatically. More than 25 million Latinos identified with more than one race in 2022, up from 3 million in 2010. The increase could be due to several factors, including changes to the census form to make it easier for people who select multiple races, and growing racial diversity. I don't really trust the fucking census forms. Like, those are I'm highly confused about what I check. I don't even know I think I usually just check other in those forms oftentimes, because they separate ethnicity and race. But yeah, I mean, I think we're also embracing maybe different cultural backgrounds that make up our Latinness, right? Again, the beauty, the gift and the curse, if you will, of being a Latino is that we are, you know, depending on where you're from, made up of a mix of different people from all across the world, from, you know, European and indigenous backgrounds and African backgrounds. You know, it's a really complicated history, if you will, and I think a lot more people are beginning to embrace the diverse background that makes them up genetically, and not just accepting the blanket statement of being, you know, Latin. And you know, I think it's a beautiful thing to be in touch with a lot of those things. I think even just like the conversations around Afro Latinos, right, and the acknowledgement of sort of taking up space as both a Black person as well as a Latino, right? Because your lived experience, especially in a place like the U.S. where race is such a hotbed topic, you know, you are, as an Afro Latino, oftentimes viewed as and treated as a Black person in this country, you know, but while at the same time, depending on what circles you fall in, also being treated as a Latin person, or it's the same thing of like life as a gringo, just in a different sort of variance of you sort of don't fit in anywhere, right? And I think, and from what I've heard in a lot of the conversations I've had is, people are really sort of celebrating both sides of themselves and not saying I fit under one or the other, but I am both, and I think that's a beautiful thing as well. Now they say the roughly 37.4 million people of Mexican origin in the U.S. represented nearly 6% of the nation's Hispanic population in 2022. Those of Puerto Rican origin are the next largest group at 5.9 million, which does not include another roughly 3.2 million Puerto Ricans who live on the island itself in 2022. The U.S. population of Puerto Ricans origin has grown partly due to people moving from Puerto Rico to the 50 states and District of Colombia. And let me see. I'm gonna pull up this chart. Hispanic groups in 2022. So I said Mexican. I'm gonna do like the top 10. Mexican number 1, Puerto Rican number 2, Salvadorian number 3, Cuban number 4, Dominican number 5, Guatemalan number 6, Colombian number 7, Honduran from people from Honduras number 8, Spaniard number 9, and Ecuadorian at number 10. Those are the highest Hispanic populations in the U.S. They also say Hispanics are the largest racial or ethnic group in states like California and Texas, and that's also like speaks to the power of being a Latino, right? Like, in two gigantic states like California and Texas, the largest racial or ethnic group is Latinos. And again, my mind immediately goes to what kind of power could we have if we were able to get on board collectively, and really get behind particular issues or policies or people in power. I don't know. Just food for thought when you think about it. Like California and Texas are gigantic and powerful states. To think that we are the majority there, yet we don't have, representation as much as we should, or they're not speaking to us as much as they should. Again, I think it shows you we're not living up to our power that we potentially could have. And this actually surprised me right here. They said North and South Dakota's Hispanic population has grown the fastest since 2010. I want to know what the fuck is going on in North Dakota and South Dakota. Why are our Latinos going to North Dakota and South Dakota? I'm actually going to see if I can look this up real quick as we are here discussing it, because that's actually an incredibly surprising fact that I never would have thought of. I never even, like, North Dakota and South Dakota are one of those places that I never in a million years would have thought to even want to think about visiting. Honestly, I have zero interest in visiting them. I mean, I would say zero. I was interested in visiting anywhere. I'm curious, but why? And they're actually saying rural counties as well in South Dakota, North Dakota. It's very, very interesting. I can't seem to find any real reason. Although there is an interesting, like, if you ever read the book The Tipping Point, I think I've referenced this before with Malcolm Gladwell, but he talks about like how certain cultures will embrace certain things, like the Asian culture. I think specifically, if I'm not mistaken, it was Filipinos, when they began to migrate to the States, like when that became a bigger trend in their community. It's like the idea of them starting I think it was a nail salon. Like it all started with one family from the Philippines, and then they told their family, and when their family came over, they also opened up their own store, and that sort of spread into becoming fabrically ingrained in like Filipino Americans, in that being an industry that they found themselves in. And I'm sure probably something like that is happening in North and South Dakota, where it started with, one or two families, and from there, they sort of put their roots down, and from there it attracted more and more until it became sort of the norm for Hispanics and Latinos, to go to places like North and South Dakota. It's really interesting, and I'll leave a link to this. I'm not going to read every single thing on this, but another interesting fact, they said that the share of U.S. Hispanics with college experience has increased since 2010. About 45% of U.S. Hispanic adults ages 25 and older had at least some college expertise in 2022, up from 36% in 2010. The share of Hispanics with a bachelor's degree or more education has increased from 13% to 20%. The share with a bachelor's degree or higher increased more among Hispanic women from 14% to 22% than Hispanic men, who only grew from 12% to 18%. We're more educated. We out here, man. We got higher numbers. We're higher. We've achieved higher levels of education, and not to say that that's like a prerequisite for success or that really determines much of anything in the real world. I know plenty of people who are doing their thing without those degrees, but I think it does show, sort of a interest in higher education and a pursuit of a life that is beyond what many immigrant parents did when they came over here, right? The idea of really hard labor, whether it was farming, whether it was, uh, other sort of labor intensive jobs. The younger generation is from these numbers, I guess, trying to give themselves an opportunity to not have such difficult job opportunities or just jobs in general as the previous generation. And honestly, I mean, isn't that the goal of most families, right? Much of the guilt, the immigrant parent guilt, is like, I want you to have a better life than I had, right? And college is usually pretty high on that list for many. And again, it doesn't mean anything if you did or didn't go, but I think it is an interesting sort of statistic, if you will. And I think probably, again, the larger conversation speaks to us finding ourselves in industries or sectors that are beyond the norms that many of our parents may have worked in historically. So yeah, I don't know, just some interesting facts that I found here for Hispanic Heritage Month. My takeaway: we are a growing population, man, and it's frustrating to think that we don't have the voice that we should have when you think about the fact that we do have the numbers out here. So I don't know, just I don't want to say disappointing, but it definitely makes you think a little bit. Now I want to talk about the workplace, right? And I want to talk about this article from weareme2.com entitled "When Resisting Whiteness in the Workplace Becomes a Problem for Latinas," right? And in it, they say, "I know all too well the feeling of being looked at under a magnifying glass, especially as a brown Latina in the professional world. Mediocrity is never an option for me. After all, as Latines, we are told to seek excellence and validation from jobs and people in power to make it, even if we have to work twice as hard, code switch, and downplay our personality and identity in the process. Workplaces and institutions in this country call us model behaviors and attributes different from our own. They call us to model behaviors and attribute different from our own as Black, brown, and indigenous people of color." Sorry, I'm trying to read this from my screen in front of me, and the font's a little small. Your boy's getting blind, so bear with me if I stutter a little bit here. They say, "If we want to succeed and to be accepted in the workplace, we practice professionalism through a set of standards by which we are measured, and the standard is whiteness." And they talk about the idea of like using your white voice at work and all these different things. And it's a really interesting conversation. Yeah, I mean, I've definitely code switched a bit. I mean, I think we all have. I would say a bit, throughout the course of my life, depending on the environment that I'm in. At times, you have to, right? Or we're told we have to, or we want to present a certain level. I think the zoomed out conversation beyond my own personal experience is the idea that whiteness is the standard. I think that's the real conversation that we're talking about here. And because whiteness is the standard, right? Whiteness is viewed as the right way, the quote unquote professional way, the way to act in a workplace. We now have to lose our culture and subscribe to basically putting on an act that is deemed acceptable in the workplace, which again is rooted in white supremacy. And I think most people aren't even aware of the fact that this was all rooted in white supremacy or colonization tactics and things of that nature. And I'm not saying your boss is a racist or your company as a whole is a racist. They very well could be, but I'm not saying that. I think we are all victims of societal norms, and because societal norms, or who has been in control traditionally, historically, it is whiteness. That's the norm, because that's who was and has been in control. And as a result, anytime we hear something different than that or see something different than that, our immediate instinct is to view it as lesser than. And of course, we all have different lenses by which we see the world, but I think we could all admit that we're guilty of this at some point in time, having our own biases, right? And that's what corporate culture often is. Again, it's like the idea of having an accent, the idea of saying anything with slang, right? The idea of having ethnic features, quote unquote, right? Even like the controversy of how people wear their hair and things like that. What is deemed professional and not is all rooted in whiteness, right? It's the proximity to whiteness. And yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting conversation. I'm not necessarily the perfect person to have this conversation, because my experience in corporate America is a bit different, working in media, where there's a bit more of a casualness to it. And there is a bit more diversity in it. And many of the people who are successful are people of color. I mean, but I think they're definitely, I think I was, I'm just like running through it in my head and trying to relate to this, which I do. I'm trying to find the right sort of story. I guess what's interesting, when I first got into radio and my connections were to like pop radio, my instinct was to replicate what I had seen other people doing, white people who were on the radio, and not using slang or trying to be so professional or uppity in a way, right? Not using words like y'all or just really sort of stripping away a bit of the personality, if you will. Right, those are the examples that I saw, so I was just trying to replicate them at the time. And then when I got with the Breakfast Club, I was able to kind of open my eyes to like seeing a bit more of an authentic side of presentation, still finding success doing so. And also the world has evolved a bit as far as pop culture and it not being so fucking white, or the sort of longing for voices that are not just white. And presenting whiteness has shifted a bit. But yeah, I can imagine in traditional corporate America that there are these sort of unspoken codes that you have to follow if you want to find success, right? And for a woman, it's even more difficult. You have to navigate sort of so many stipulations that things that men don't have to think about, right? And then on top of that, being a woman of color, you have to try and you're almost like you're showing up when you already have a strike against you, right? There's depending on the environment, there's an expectation already that you don't belong here, and of course you have to then do all you can to prove that you belong there, and in doing so, you have to be like the perfect sort of citizen, the perfect specimen, as they sort of touched on over here. And that makes you lose a bit of yourself in the process, obviously. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely like really interesting. And also it's like, in this article, it goes to touch on like places rooted in white supremacy function, thinking that they know better, speak better, work better, and are better than the world that we come from. And I think that's the other thing as well. people with an accent are usually by many automatically viewed as sort of not as intelligent almost, right? And for no fault of their own, literally just having a bit of an accent, strikes a couple, puts another strike against you. The second somebody hears an accent, they, especially in a lot of the world that we live in today, this sort of post-Trump era, with this rhetoric about immigrants, they automatically hear a Latin accent, and the thought is, they don't belong here. The thought is, this person is going to be of an issue, or whatever the case might be. There's also, I think, in general with women, kind of getting back to that, like, especially Latin women, it's also the idea of like the navigating of how do you stand up for yourself without then getting the trope of, being a fiery Latino, like all those little things. And Black women deal with this as well, women of color in general. It's all really interesting and sad about the things that people have to navigate just to exist in these spaces that they very much belong so in, right? We even saw the pulling back to that article I was referencing earlier, like the numbers. You have a lot of Latinos being very well educated, but going into those environments where it's set up to fail them because of the white supremacist history of corporate culture in general, and I think workplace culture in general. And I think we don't give enough credit to the fact that us Latinos, people of color in general, have to navigate on top of our job, navigate these other obstacles that we inherit as a result of these systems that have historically been in place. And it's really sad and really frustrating, the fact that, you can't just show up and go there and do your job and rest on the fact that you are good at what you do, but you also have to figure out how to play the game of whiteness as well, which obviously is incredibly disappointing and I think counterproductive to, anybody being able to just be present and happy in the workplace, which I think this article speaks to a bunch. And I think the worst thing for anybody in any space is to not feel like you could show up authentically. And if you're not showing up authentically, how can you really give your all to something, right? And I think that's the disappointing part about, corporate culture. As much as I'm sure it's gotten better, it still exists within that. It's so ingrained and deeply embedded into our psyche as Americans, that I think it affects people's everyday lives in ways like this one. Now, with that said, we'll talk about some positivity here. Somebody that I've called out a bunch, continuing to do the work and apply pressure, which I love to see. So we'll touch on that for our Mi Gente segment. Mi Gente. All right, so I've been very vocal about wanting to see someone like Bad Bunny doing more for the community, for Puerto Rico, being a bit more active. And I talked about him, I think it was last week's Mi Gente segment or the one before, how he was on a podcast and he was really encouraging people to go out there and vote and did an amazing job with that. Now, something I observed when I was in Puerto Rico, I saw these billboards all around the island that were slamming the new progressive party in Puerto Rico, Puerto Rico's new progressive party called PNP. That is who has been in power for a while now. In Puerto Rico, I think I've explained this, but I'll briefly explain it. The political parties are not set up like Democrat, Republican, how they are here in the States. It is basically a pro-statehood party, which is the PNP. You have the status quo party, and then you have the independent party, who wants independence from Puerto Rico. That's sort of again, it's not Democrat, Republican. That's kind of how they break it up. Now, the PNP party is incredibly powerful. As I said, they've been the ones in power, and Bad Bunny has been attacking them, and he's been supporting the independent candidate, Juan Dalmau. Also, Residente from Calle 13 also did. But Bad Bunny now has come out and taking credit for these billboards that have caused quite a stir around the island. He's taken credit and said that he's the one who actually paid for them, which is just amazing. And I mean, there's a few different ones. One of the ones I saw was if you vote for PNP, you don't love Puerto Rico. And I'm roughly translating here. Another one was a vote for the PNP is a vote for corruption. And this is a beautiful moment right here, right? Because think about this. Bad Bunny, arguably one of the biggest stars in the world, the biggest star from Puerto Rico as of late, particularly for this generation, is applying that pressure. I've got to salute Bad Bunny for this, right? You gotta give people credit where credit's due, because for as much as I feel like maybe he could have done more in the past and things like that, he's keeping the pressure up. You know, this is a bold move that I love to see, right? Because he is somebody who can fight money with money, which is why I've always demanded so much more of him, because he has the power to really take on these people, right? Because a lot of the issue with Puerto Rico in the past, and why, you know, the messaging I think has been so lost or favored the PNP, is because they have so much money. They have all of these donors, right? They have all the advertising dollars to go around and sort of saturate people's everyday life and make them incredibly familiar with the candidate that is representing that party. And in the past, the independent party hasn't had those types of funds and that type of visibility to bring attention to their candidate. Now you have people like Bad Bunny stepping in and endorsing someone like Juan Dalmau, someone like Presidente, endorsing someone like Juan Dalmau, bringing in all of that attention. And because of social media, you've also now democratized attention, where the advertising dollars may not matter as much, because someone like Juan Dalmau can go on a popular YouTuber's channel, a popular podcaster's channel, and gain all of this attention to what they're trying to do for the island. And now Puerto Rico, and now Bad Bunny, I should say, now Bad Bunny is fighting fire with fire, right? He is saying, I'm going to take a stand here, and I'm going to use my money to fight against your money, essentially. And in doing so, I'm going to take out advertisements that call out, the PNP for being the corrupt party that they are, right? For being the party that is responsible for Luma, for being the party that is not doing the will of the people, and that has proven time and time again to not give a damn about the people, right? And he's causing so much noise because he has the platform, he has the financial means to go up against, these people toe to toe. And that's why I've always called on someone like a Bad Bunny to really step up in this way, because he has this advantage that nobody else does, right? When you have a platform, when you have money, when you have connections, you can do so much good with that, right? The reason why a lot of these corrupt politicians continue to find success is because their pockets are being lined by very important people, by corporations who have endless amounts of money to do so. The reason why, someone like Jennifer Gonzalez is a household name is because you can't get away from her because of the amount of money that is behind the marketing and advertising of her being the next governor of Puerto Rico, right? That's why these candidates have continued to maintain power, is because they have the money and funds to reach the most people. But now the playing field has been leveled, because someone like Bad Bunny has decided to say, no, I'm not going to take my foot off of the gas. I'm going to fight fire with fire. I'm going to put up my own money to make sure that people know exactly what is going on in Puerto Rico, and that they are no longer being played a fool by this political party, the PNP. And for that, you have to salute somebody like Bad Bunny. Again, I've been a critic of him in the past for not doing enough, but this is exactly what I'm talking about. Think about this conversation that is happening now as a result of Bad Bunny putting his money where his mouth is, right? Him taking out these billboards, these advertisements, calling out boldly in a way that nobody has the corruption of this party, and putting it on display for the people of Puerto Rico to see, on their way to work, on their way to living their life, it being put out there. And now the internet is picking up on it, and they're sharing these billboards that Bad Bunny, funded to call out the BS that has been going on in the island, the corruption that's been going on in the island. And as a result, the PNP is running scared, right? Now the PNP went up and put their own billboard out there and calling out Bad Bunny by name. But this is what's happening. When you have the power that somebody like a Bad Bunny has, you have to step up, right? It'd be such a waste. You can't claim to love the island if you are not ready to put your money where your mouth is. And right here, right now, he's proven he's willing to do so. He's willing to take on the politicians because he's now in a position of power. He can fight for the people in a way they can't fight for themselves. And that's why this is such a tremendous moment. And you could see how shaken they are by it. Jennifer Gonzalez is out there at the PNP or rally they were doing, the event they were doing, and she's playing a song that talks about eating the bunny, right? Like literally they're attacking Bad Bunny as if he's the one running for office. And that shows you they are in fear of the fact that somebody so powerful is now coming against them and supporting their opposition and is now calling them out on their BS and on their corruption. This is the closest we've ever been to history potentially being made right here, right? Because what's happened is you've gone back and forth between the pro-statehood party and the status quo party, but the independent party has not been successful in their efforts to take office. And now, because of somebody like Bad Bunny, because again of his money, his power, his connections, he has now made, someone like Juan Dalmau an actual legitimate candidate to possibly win this gubernatorial election here in Puerto Rico. And really giving the people an opportunity to take their future in their hands and end the nonsense and end the corruption that has been going on the island as a result of politicians like Jennifer Gonzalez and the PNP party as a whole. So gotta salute Bad Bunny. You love to see things like this happening when he is using all of the power and access that he has for good to fight on behalf of the people of Puerto Rico. Love to see it. And now you just have to show up. Everybody in Puerto Rico, show up and vote for the next governor of Puerto Rico. And if you want real change, obviously that means not putting into office the same political party that keeps handing you the same nonsense term after term. Just I'm fired up when I see these things. Again, this is exactly what I've been talking about to no end. And I love to see he's embracing this power and fighting fire with fire. It's a beautiful day here in Puerto Rico. I'm talking like I'm in Puerto Rico. I don't even know where the hell I am right now. I literally just got off a plane a few hours ago. So I'm still speaking and thinking as if I'm still on the island right now. My heart is there, I think, is what I'm getting at. Man, I'm fired up. But yeah, that's it for the Mi Gente segment. Salute to Bad Bunny. You are doing the work, and I'm proud of you, and I appreciate you right now. All right. With that said, we'll sum up everything we talked about today in a neat little bow in a segment called Conclusion Stew.
Time for conclusion stew.
All right, so to quickly, touch on what we talked about today, some facts about Hispanic Heritage Month or Latinos for Hispanic Heritage Month. Shout out to the Pew Center for Pew Research Center for putting that together. My takeaway is we are a growing population. We have so much fucking power, and we're not realizing it just yet. But there's hope here as we become a large majority in this country. And I hope that we begin to have far more voices that try to organize us together so that we can, give ourselves a better and brighter future. And, that kind of leads, I think, into this article by We Are Me Too, talking about having to embrace whiteness in the workplace and sort of lose a bit of your authenticity as a result, and the long history of white supremacy in corporate culture, and that being the norm, that being the sort of baseline of what is deemed to be professional. And it's all rooted in whiteness, and obviously it creates obstacles for people of color to not only find success, but I think just be happy in their jobs, right? Because they have to sacrifice authenticity as a result. And there's still obviously a lot of work to be done in corporate culture in general. And then in our Mi Gente segment, I got to give credit where credit's due. I critique the fuck out of him all the time, but I love to see what Bad Bunny is doing right now. I'm proud of it. I am, just happy to see him really stepping up and fighting fire with fire and utilizing the power, money, and connections and resources that he has right now to be a voice for the people and to be a voice for change. And I'm just super, super proud, super, super happy about that. So salute to him. Now, with that said, I'm going to try and get my life together here. And I can't, unfortunately, escape to Puerto Rico for a couple of months. So I got to wrap my head around that and get my shit in order while I'm back home. Definitely gonna be doing that this weekend. Hope y'all have an amazing weekend. We'll be back on Tuesday with a brand new episode. Till then, stay safe and we will talk soon. Peace.